Let it be. But me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to this Louie T Network exclusive. The NFLPA and the NFL have reached a deal, agreed to a new CBA, labor peace for the next decade. I myself am elated. I did not think this was going to go off as smoothly as it did. Remember, the last time we did this, there was no football or the threat of no football. There was replacement officials. It was a mess, okay? It got done, but not without a little bit of hardship and some really poorly officiated games to start out that 2011 season. Nonetheless, I'm so happy about this because I thought that there was a legitimate shot at a strike. You know, I thought there was going to be a chance there would be either no football or replacement players or some nonsense like that. And I'm just so glad that they were able to reach this agreement. Now, not all players are happy about this. And then obviously, if you've been following this story as it kind of developed, you know, there were players coming out, whether it's Aaron Rodgers or it's Derek Wolfe or, you know, any Chris Harris Jr., all these guys had pretty strong words, J.J. Watt, strong words against this CBA agreement and thought that the CBA proposed by the owners was less than stellar. And some of them just downright thought it was trash. So whatever the case may be, it's a majority vote and the majority won. Not by much, as you'll see here in a second, but nonetheless, more players in the NFL Player Association voted yes than no, and thus we have a new CBA in place for the next 10 years. Let's get to the meat and potatoes. And before we do that, I just want to mention a trade that reportedly has commenced and will not be finalized, obviously, until the start of the new league year. But sounds like Calais Campbell is on the move to Jacksonville for a 5th-round pick, it sounds like. And he'll try to reach a new deal with the Baltimore Ravens. And I think now that the CBA is in place, you're going to start seeing some deals be done. And if you're a Redskins fan, you're hoping that means that now that there is a locked-in salary cap and you know what you can and can't do in terms of a franchise tag, this, that, and the other, you're hoping that now that there is solid footing underneath the NFL with this new CBA, now deals will start to consummate. So hopefully that means a Trent Williams deal will get done sooner rather than later. We will see. But in any event, that's actually a really good move for Baltimore. I think he still has something left in the tank. And if you're Jacksonville, continue to stockpile assets to try to build this thing up the way that you view it moving forward. So let's get to this CBA and what it entails and take a look at this CBA. So the first thing you'll notice with the CBA is the vote. And I put the vote right underneath this new CBA agreement. And again, the first thing that you should note is that 10 years of labor peace will be brought through this agreement. So starting in 2020, all the way through 2030, the NFL will have labor peace between the NFLPA and the NFL itself. Now, if anything were to arise between then, you got to suck it up because it's already done. But as you can see, the vote was not a unanimous decision, and you knew it wasn't going to be, but it wasn't even a landslide either way. I mean, you literally had just 60 more yeses than nos. But again, that's all it took. As you can see, 51.5% of the players voted yes. And all you needed it to be was 50.1%. That's it. Because that's the majority. All right. So they got their 50.1% and then some. And again, not by much. As you can see, a lot of players did not agree with the new CBA, but enough of them did. And what you got to understand is a lot of the guys that voted yes are guys that probably aren't making a bunch of money. And the guys that voted no are probably the more prominent players in the league, that have a say and that are going to make money regardless. The guys that aren't making a bunch of money, and you got to understand that on every single team in the NFL, there are probably about 5 or 6 guys making some real serious dough, and then everybody else kind of falls in line. For those guys that are on the back end of the roster trying to hang on or look just happy to be in the league, they're going to vote yes, because it's more money in here for those guys. So if I'm one of those players, I'm voting yes for this thing too. I'm trying to get my hand on as much money as possible, and voting yes is going to help me do that. If I'm one of those guys that's established in this league, that's making a ton of money and going to continue to make money, then I probably would have voted no as well. But either way, it's done, and the players have spoken. So the first thing you see is that the salary cap is going to be upped another $10 million from last year's salary cap total. Last year, it was $188.2 million. All right, now it's going to be $198.2 million that these teams will have at their disposal to fill out their entire roster. So the salary cap continues to rise. It's done this pretty steadily since 2012. You've seen an increase from, anywhere from $9 to $12 million over the last 8 years or so strong. And this is right in line with that. So another $10 million increase for the salary cap from $188.2 million to $198.2 million. That's the first thing that you will notice with this new CBA. 17-game schedule to begin sometime after the 2020 season. Right now, it sounds like they're going to try to get this thing kicked off in 2021, kind of iron out all the wrinkles during this season and come to a full agreement on how everything is going to unfold in 2021. But right now, a 17-game schedule is going to take place, just not in the upcoming season. Sounds like it's going to be not this upcoming season, but the season that then follows. We'll see what happens with that. But there will be an 18-week regular season coming down the pipeline here shortly. Still only one bye week, but 17 regular season games for a total of 18 weeks of regular season NFL action. With that comes one less preseason game. We'll get to that a little bit later on as well. Playoffs expanded to 7 teams in each conference, with only the number 1 seed getting a first round bye in each conference. So it's a really simple format. Instead of 12 teams, which we are accustomed to, and if it wasn't broken, I really didn't need it to be fixed. I wasn't a huge fan of another team getting in. Usually that 7th team that just misses the postseason usually isn't that good. Every now and again, every 3 or 4, maybe 5 years or so, you'll get a 10-6 team that was really good throughout the season that just missed the postseason. You're like, damn, that team deserved to go. But for the most part, that 7th team is usually 8-8. It's usually 7-9. It's not really a really good ball club. So I don't really care too much for this whole 7th team getting in each conference, but it is what it is. It's going to be the number 1 seed, instead of the number 1 and 2 seeds both getting a first round bye, you're now going to see only the number 1 seed get a bye. And so the playoff games will be set up as follows. The 2 seed will play the 7 seed. The 3 seed will play the 6 seed. The 4 seed will play the 5 seed. Those are all wild card weekend matchups. So instead of getting just 2 games on that Saturday and 2 games on that Sunday, you're now going to get a triple header, 3 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday. So it's going to be wild. It's probably going to be more like a regular season Sunday and Saturday for that matter, where you're probably going to get a 1, a 4:30 and an 8:15 kickoff. So it's going to be a jam-packed wild card weekend. And so it should be a ton of fun. And then you're going to get your customary double header in the divisional round, 2 games on Saturday, 2 games on Sunday, and then the same format moving forward. In the championship game, you'll get your 2 games on Sunday, and then you get your Super Bowl 2 weeks later. So not much has changed from that standpoint, but the 7 teams making the postseason will be enacted in 2020. So that's immediately effective this upcoming season. And so you'll see 7 teams for a total of 14 make it to the postseason, 7 in each conference. And only the number 1 seed will get the first round bye in each conference. Only 1 franchise tag may be applied per offseason. So unlike the old CBA, where you could slap the franchise tag on one player and then slap a transition tag on yet another player, which we thought maybe the Cowboys would do with Dak and Amari Cooper this offseason, that is no longer an option for teams. You either use the franchise tag or you use the transition tag, but you cannot use both. This isn't an and situation. It's an or situation. So that's really favorable for the players. Takes a little bit of the control out of the hands of these organizations and hands a little bit more control over to the player as to where they end up. And so going to be a tough decision for the Cowboys if they're not going to be able to reach a long-term agreement with Dak Prescott before Monday. If that is the case, they're probably going to run the risk of losing Amari Cooper. Another item coming from this CBA is shorter preseason. And I talked about that, alluded to it earlier. Instead of the 4-game preseason that we've had to mull through over the last 2 decades or so, just 3 preseason games now. So it's been shortened by a game, which no one's going to complain about. And so 1 less preseason game, 1 more regular season game. Another item from the CBA, larger rosters, okay? If you're going to add a 17th game to the slate, then you're going to need to add more players to be able to offset the grind that comes with an extra NFL contest. So active rosters go from 53 to 55. Okay, so 2 extra players will be allotted on the rosters. You're going to see the game day rosters, and I still don't understand why game day rosters aren't allowed to just include all 53, now 55 of your active day roster members. I just don't understand why the game day roster has to be shortened. But nonetheless, game day rosters go from 46 to 48. So still 7 guys will be out on game day. However, that number is upped by an additional 2 players. And practice squad goes from 10 players to 12 players. And eventually it sounds like that may grow to 14 players by 2022. We'll see how that goes. But as of right now, you're going to get larger rosters, larger game day rosters, larger practice squad rosters. And I think all of these things will start to take place once the 17-game schedule is in effect. We'll see if that takes place this year or if they wait until the 17-game schedule takes effect, possibly next year, to enact the larger rosters. Players get more revenue. They get a larger share of the pie, not by much, but when you're talking about millions and millions and millions upon millions of dollars, an extra percent to 1.5% is a lot of money for these players. So they go from 47% of the revenue pie to 48%, and it could grow as high as 48.5%. Doesn't sound like much, but again, when that TV money starts going in and they start getting all of this revenue money in from all of these different avenues, that money is going to pile up. That extra percent, possibly upwards of 1.5%, is going to loom large for these players. So don't sleep on how much that actually is as you look at that percentage and think to yourself, that's not that much of a bump increase. It actually really is for these players. And then you have a higher minimum salary and higher spending floor for each team. So, and I think this is the one thing right here that really spoke to a lot of the back end roster guys and the guys that are hanging on to NFL rosters by a whim, is that, you know, they're going to have a higher minimum salary. You know, I think it used to be, you know, $500 and something $1,000 for the minimum NFL salary, like 525 or something like that. That's going to be up to like over 600K. And then it all goes upon, it's a scale that it goes on according to how long you have been in the league, almost like a vested veteran thing. If you've been in the league 2 years and you're on a minimum deal, then it's X amount of dollars. Let's call it 700K. If you've been in the league 3 years, then it's 800K. 4 years, it's 900. And then if you've been in the league 5 years or more on a veteran minimum deal that a team is offering you, it'll be just over $1 million. So that's a huge increase for some of these guys looking to scratch, claw, and fight to stay on an NFL roster and getting veteran minimum deals. That's a really big coup for them. And then also higher spending floors means teams will be required to spend a certain amount of money on free agents and guys that are on the roster. They're going to be required to spend a certain amount of money. So the floor has been heightened so that they can't hold on to a bunch of their money, which usually bodes well for guys either getting paid more or more guys getting paid. So they could easily take that extra money that they have to spend and invest it in one player, or they could spread it amongst 6 or 7 different guys. Either way, more money for the players is what that amounts to. So that's a good thing for the players as well. Lessened punishments for positive weed tests. So they used to suspend players for testing positive for the active ingredient in weed, which is THC. Well, that's no longer the case. If you test positive for THC, they're not going to automatically suspend you. And furthermore, the penalties will be a lot less harsh, I should say, for testing positive for weed. So that's also something the players were very hell-bent on getting done, and they did in this CBA. And also the players will receive a game check for that 17th and final game of the season. And I know you say to yourself, well, duh, they're getting paid for a game that they're playing in. Why wouldn't they? Well, initially that wasn't the case. They weren't going to get a check for that 17th game. The pay scale was going to remain where they were just going to get their yearly salary paid through 16 weeks. And there wasn't going to be an extra check issued in week 17. Well, that's no longer the case. They're going to get a check in week 17. It cannot exceed over $250,000. So they have to make it work contractually so that that last check doesn't exceed $250K, but they're going to get paid in week 17. And so that's another takeaway from this CBA. So that's essentially the CBA in a nutshell and what it's going to mean for the players moving forward. Like I said, not a lot of players or a lot of players are disgruntled about this thing being signed. But at the end of the day, the majority spoke. It is what it is. We'll see if there's any fallout to that. But at the end of the day, once this thing is officially done, it's done. So do have a super chat, and we'll read that, and then we'll get out of here. DMV fan 123, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciated. DMV fan 123 writes, only one bye still. All yes voters need a CTE test. I thought that they initially were going to have a second bye week. The NFL, if you remember, and I talked about this on my podcast once upon a time, the NFL explored the 2-week bye system in like the 1993 season, I believe it was, that they did this. It might have been, it was either 1993 or 1991 or 90, excuse me, one of the two. They had 2 bye weeks. It extended the season out to, I believe, made that a 17-week season then. And it did not go over very well. And so it was one and done. And I don't think they want to go down that road again. So they only had 1 bye week. And honestly speaking, I don't know if a second bye week really makes that big of a difference or not. I've never played at that level, so I can't say if it does or doesn't. But obviously the players didn't feel like it did, or else they would have probably pushed a little harder for an additional bye week. Reese says, Lou, the last CBA was a long, laborious process. There was danger of it bleeding into the season. Why do you think this one was agreed to so quickly? I think there were a lot of concessions made by the owners, and I think that was the thing that got a lot of players on board. The weed thing was a big deal. The higher league minimums, the higher league floors for spending, those were things that I think really caught the eye of guys. Like I said, not everyone was on board with this thing, but when you see the revenue bump from 47 to 48%, possibly getting as high as 48.5%, with all the new TV money that's going to come in, that's going to end up being a ton of money for these players. That 17th game is another extra revenue check for these guys as well. And as you continue to see this league grow, the extra playoff game, the extra week of games, that's all new TV money. Okay, so all of that new money that's coming, you're getting a piece of that if you're the players. I think all of those things also factored into the players saying yes. I think there were just too many things in this CBA that made sense for too many guys that allowed them to vote yes. If some of the concessions weren't made by the owners and they weren't willing to meet the players halfway on some of these things, I think you would have seen a situation like the last labor agreement that we saw that wasn't peacefully done back in 2011. But instead, I think the owners understood that they were going to have to give way on certain things. They did that, and it made this situation a little bit more tenable and ultimately got the deal done before the start of the new league year, which I am ecstatic about because, again, I didn't, like you mentioned, I did not want to go through that long, arduous process that we did the last time. And so this avoids all of that. And on top of matters, you don't have to deal with the threat of work stoppage now, which, is music to my ears. Got another super chat. Going to go ahead and read that. This one from CGM87. CGM87, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciated. CGM87 writes, how would the 17th game be added to the scheduling formula? Also, hate 14 teams in the playoffs. Nothing like more mediocre teams getting bounced in the first round. Absolutely. I'll take the last portion of that comment and then we'll go back to your scheduling of the 17th game. So really, the NFL calendar doesn't change much, but I can't stand the fact that 14 teams are getting in. And I know it's only a 2-team difference, but you're getting closer and closer to half of the league getting into the playoffs, which to me, that shouldn't be the case. 12 was a really good number out of 32. It was right around like 40% or so of the league was getting in. And that's a good number because honestly speaking, and I used to always say this when there would be a threat of, changing the playoff landscape, is that, if you can't qualify for the playoffs, you didn't deserve to be there. It's really simple. 6 teams used to get in, and 4 of them were division winners, and 2 were wild cards. And if you weren't one of the top 6, if you didn't win your division, if you didn't qualify for one of those 2 wild card spots, then you didn't deserve to be in the postseason. And so I'm kind of disappointed that they extended this out. It may ultimately benefit my team. I might be that last wild card in and feel like, man, we got in, now we can do some damage. And you know how I feel about the postseason. Once you get in and they shut those doors and everybody's in the party that belongs, it's all hell breaks loose and it's anybody's game. You know what I mean? But at the same time, do you really think the Pittsburgh Steelers last year at 8-8 would have done any damage in the AFC playoffs last year? Do you think the Los Angeles Rams at 9-7 would have done any damage in the NFC playoffs had they gotten in? The answer for me is no and no, okay? They wouldn't have beat the 2 seed in either conference last year, all right? So I just don't see how this really, so the Chiefs weren't beating the Steelers last year in the playoffs because the Chiefs were the 2 seed, if you recall. All right, they weren't going to beat the Steelers, weren't going to beat the Chiefs. And in the NFC, the 2 seed was the, San Francisco was 1, and who was the 2 seed in the NFC? Seattle ended up going to Green Bay as the and you had the Vikings and the Saints. And oh man, why is this taking so long for me to think about? See, oh, so you had the Vikings beat the Saints, and the Saints or the Vikings went to San Francisco, who ultimately was the 1 seed, and then the 2 seed ended up being um, the Packers, right? Yeah, I think the Packers got the 2 seed because Seattle. I'm trying to think. I thought Seattle went to Green Bay and lost. So no, Green Bay didn't have the 2 seed. Who the hell had the Packers had the 2 seed, right? Who did Seattle play in the first round of the playoffs then? Because why am I drawing a brain fart here? Now see, I hate when I do this because now I'm like a dog with a bone. Now I can't let this go until I figure it out. So San Francisco was 1 seed. Green Bay was the 2 seed. Who was the 3 seed? The 3 seed was New Orleans, right? Because they played the Vikings, who were the 6 seed, and then the 4 seed was so San Francisco 1 seed, Green Bay 2 seed, Saints 3 seed. Who was the 4th seed? Oh, that's right. The Eagles were the 4th. That's why I couldn't remember. I'm like, who did Seattle beat? That's right. The forgotten division. The NFC East was so bad last year that the Eagles got in, and I forgot that damn quick. It would be my division, right? So there we go. I got it. I figured it out. The Eagles were the division winner in the NFC, who the Seattle Seahawks then promptly went to Philadelphia, won, and then went to Green Bay and lost. And that's how we got to the NFC Championship game. So the Green Bay Packers would have beaten the Rams last year. So my point is, adding that 7th team into the postseason for me is it's like it's irrelevant really at the end of the day. That team may win a game. I can't see a 7 seed getting all the way to the Super Bowl, but we'll see how long it takes that to take place. How long it takes for the first 7 seed ever in NFL history to get to the Super Bowl. I think it's going to take quite a while, but nonetheless, when I look at the way it's formatted, it's just for the money. It's just for the extra game on Saturday and Sunday and Wild Card Weekend. It's for the extra TV money, it's for more advertisements. It's really for the money, and it's not for the quality of the product. It's just for the money. So it's a money grab by the NFL. I really don't like it, but it is what it is. As far as the extended or the 17th game, so they're just going to remove one game from the preseason, and that's it. So the 17th game it's really just them extending it out. The season should end right around the same time. If they push it back a week because usually the NFL starts the week after Labor Day. So if they continue with that trend, then I think the Super Bowl will then be pushed out 1 week. And so, which would be perfect because a lot of people are off on President's Day Monday, and we've all clamored for the day after the Super Bowl to be a holiday. And if this, in fact, is the way the NFL plans on doing this, which they don't plan to alter when the season starts, there'll be an extra week between that final preseason game, because there used to be that final preseason game, and then you got a week, and then boom, the season started. There'll be a week between that final preseason game. There'll be like a bye week to start off the season. That's why you don't need an extra bye week, because they'll get a week off after training camp and after the preseason games. You'll get a full week off, and then you'll go from, the start of the season to the end of the season being an extra week longer because of the extra game. And so you'll end up with the season, instead of being the first Sunday in February, it'll be that second Sunday, which will run you right into President's Day weekend. And most people will be off that next day. So that's how it looks like it's going to take place. Also, another super chat from CGM87. Thank you for the super chat once again, CGM87. 87, who writes, the extended playoffs will keep 11-5 and 10-6 from missing, though, but bad division winners with losing records are a bigger concern. Absolutely. Most likely, 10-6, you probably get in. There aren't too many seasons where 10-6 is missed, but there have been some. I remember one year with Ryan Fitzpatrick leading the Jets. They went 10-6, but missed the postseason. I remember a year where the Browns were 10-6. That was the year I want to say that Billy Ho was the quarterback. No, not Billy Ho. That was the year that they had, the dude that was in Carolina for all those years. That was the Braylon Edwards and Kellen Winslow Jr. year with, and I can see his damn face too, man. The quarterback that used to play for the Panthers for all those years as a backup. Anyway, they went 10-6, missed the postseason one year. The Patriots went 10-6, 11-5 one year, the year that Brady was out with Matt Cassell, and they missed the postseason. So it's happened. I think it happened as recently as like 2015, 16, somewhere in there, where I remember one year the NFC South was ridiculous, and I think they had like 3 teams at double-digit wins, and one of them didn't make it. I know Carolina was 11-5 one year, and the Saints were 12-4, and I want to say the Falcons might have been 10-6, and somebody else was 10-6 and didn't get in. Whatever. You won't have too many of those situations where someone wins double-digit games and won't get in. But more times than not, that 7th seed isn't going to be a 10-6 team. It's going to be a 9-7, 8-8, even a 7-9, depending on how bad it is in that conference that year. That 7th seed may be a below 500 team. But you're right. You're absolutely 100% spot on. It's more about the division winners that stink, that hold up a home playoff game and hold it hostage, than it is, this 7th seed. Really, and that has less to do with adding a 7th team and more about reseeding the playoffs. I think you should get an automatic bid to the postseason if you win your division. Winning your division should mean something. However, that shouldn't mean you automatically get a home playoff game. If you, like the Eagles were last year, and I think the Eagles ultimately made it to 9-7, which I told you we couldn't allow the NFC East to finish with the losing record. But let's just say that you finish up the season 8-8 as a division winner. You shouldn't be at home as a 4 seed hosting an 11-5 team like the Chiefs were. What was it? The Chargers were 2 years ago when they went 12-4, but because they lost the division to the Chiefs, who went 13-3 that year, they ended up having to go on the road to Baltimore. Now, they ultimately won that game, but still, they should have been playing that game at home. It's no excuse that they're a 12-4 team on the road against a team with a lesser record. I think Baltimore might have been like 11-5 or 10-6 that year when they won the division 2 years ago. But that's probably what should happen, but it's not going to happen. It doesn't sound like you're going to get playoff reseeding. So, it is what it is. But at this point, it is pretty disappointing that you're going to still have a division winner that barely made it in, but won their division because their division is so bad, and they're going to host a playoff game. But, it is what it is. Got another super chat. This one from Barrett Downing, my man BD. Thank you for the super chat, BD, as always, blessing the program. Thank you so much, Barrett Downing, for the super chat. My man BD writes, hey, Louie, thanks for being a distraction. I see all these people fighting over toilet paper and water, and it's really is a sample of humanity we have for each other. Thanks for being a distraction. Respect. I couldn't agree with you more. That's what sports usually is for us, but because there are no sports, there is no diversion right now, and so that's why I hope the NFL doesn't push back the start of their league year. And I said this yesterday. You're going to get some, pushback from other people. You're going to get some pressure from outside sources, some of it coming from inside the NFL building, where some people think that the NFL should push back the start of the league year. I, however, do not think that is the right move. I think the league should continue on business as usual, and hopefully they will, in fact, decide to do that. Um, let's get to a couple more comments and then we'll get out of here. Let's see. We got Emperor Meech who says, like Shannon Sharp said, I don't want to hear the players complaining at all. They signed up for this, and most of them won't be in the league in 5 years after this vote. Exactly. That's pretty much spot on. The guys that are making most of the noise won't be here by the time this next thing is ready to be voted upon. And so the players have spoken. It is what it is. And that's that pretty much. Reese says, is the preseason ruling effective immediately, or is that next season? I think the preseason shortening will be when they enact the 17 games. That's what it sounds like. We'll see what happens, but I'm assuming that won't go in effect until the 17-game schedule, which by all accounts is going to start in 2021. The 20th Mike says, you think this is a cash grab, but I'm glad for the 3 preseason games. As I mentioned at the top or earlier in the show, this is absolutely a cash grab. Absolutely the league trying to get their hands on more money. And look, they've tried to find more revenue streams, the whole going over to London and the Mexico City. These are all ways of the NFL trying to generate new revenue. But at the end of the day, they had almost pretty much exhausted all new avenue areas. And so they had to do something to get more money. This is the way that they figured they could do it, and they did it successfully. Reese says, the 4th preseason game has always been meaningless. You know who is making your team by then. For the most part, yeah, there may be 1 or 2 roster spots. Like, I can give you a great example. I really feel like Steven Sims Jr. On the Redskins roster made the team in the final preseason game. I think he was on the bubble, and he had a stellar final preseason game, and I think that pushed him over the top to make the football team. And he's now a mainstay on this team, and I couldn't imagine our receiving core without him. So there is some meaning to that last preseason game for some of those back-end roster guys. But as you mentioned, out of a 53-man roster, you've probably got 50 spots already locked in by that 3rd preseason game. And as you go into that 4th preseason game, you got 3 spots usually up for grabs, essentially. You know, if that many, depending on the team. Octavius Brownlee says, what is your biggest like and dislike about the new CBA? My biggest dislike, and again, honestly, I'm not going to really harp on this, and because honestly, I don't really care. I don't care as much. I was passionate early on, but once I saw this was going to happen, I kind of wrapped my brain around it. But I could have done without the extra postseason teams. You know, 7 postseason teams instead of 6. The 1 less bye week for the teams and the extra playoff game. I was actually cool with not having a game at 1 o'clock. You know, I actually liked having my freedom to get up late and do some things, run some errands, and didn't have to worry about football till 4:30. Now it's going to be 1, 4:30, and 8:15. So that's now dead. I could have done without the 7th playoff game, or 7th playoff team in each conference. So that's probably the thing I dislike the most. The thing that I like the most out of this CBA, I don't know, I guess anything that's more money for the players. You know, I guess the removal of the 4th preseason game is also nice, but that just means the 3rd preseason becomes irrelevant now. You know, 3rd preseason game. So all they did was take 1 meaningless preseason game and push it forward, or push it back to the 3rd preseason game now. And so the first 2 will have more meaning. And I guess that means you get more meaningful football in the first 2 preseason games, because you don't have that extra game to kind of lollygag and BS. So I guess that first preseason game, you'll see more starters in that game. That 2nd preseason game will now act as your de facto dress rehearsal game, I'm assuming. And then that 3rd preseason game will turn into what the 4th preseason game was. So I guess the preseason thing is the new big takeaway for me in terms of the things that I liked in the CBA. Niners fan says, I don't think the extra bye will help very much. There will still be plenty of injuries with the extra games in the season. So there isn't an extra bye, but as you mentioned, I don't think it would have helped all that much. So I think the NFL realized that and said, no need to extend the season out even longer than we already have. The extra bye week isn't that big of a deal. Reese says Bucks went 10-6 in 2010 and missed the playoffs. Lost a tiebreaker to the eventual Super Bowl champion Packers. There you go. So it's happened numerous times in the last decade or so, but not enough to warrant an additional playoff team. It happened in 2010, as Reed just mentioned, and the Packers did go on to win that Super Bowl as a 6th seed. I think they were the most recent 6th seed to win the Super Bowl, as a matter of fact. So it doesn't happen very often that final team into the postseason wins the Super Bowl, but it can. The Steelers, I remember as a 6th seed, like 2 years prior to the Packers winning it as a 6th seed, did it. That Jerome Bettis team that got in as a 6th seed went to Indianapolis. Bettis almost fumbled the game away. Roethlisberger with the shoestring tackle saved the game, ended up winning that game, and ended up going on to win that Super Bowl versus the Seattle Seahawks. So it's happened. It doesn't happen very often. So that's why I wasn't a huge fan of the 7th playoff teams. Octavius Brownlee says, read that one already. And Reese says, Tannehill just got 4 years, $118 million with $62 million of it guaranteed. That's breaking news if that is in fact true. That is crazy. That is crazy if that in fact has taken place. But you know what? Good for him. He went from being a backup that looked like he had journeyman backup written all over him after being a former first-round pick. And he got his opportunity. He did not waste and squander that opportunity, took full advantage of it, took his team to the AFC Championship game, and now he's cashed in. Good for Ryan Tannehill. And now what that allows the Tennessee Titans to do, which is what I think the Cowboys are ultimately going to have to do, is they're going to have to reach that long-term deal with their quarterback so that they can use the franchise tag on Derrick Henry. Now the Titans are going to be able to use that franchise tag on Derrick Henry. The Cowboys want to use that franchise tag on Amari Cooper. They're going to have to do what the Titans just did, which is reach a long-term agreement with your quarterback so that you take him off of the franchise tag market and are able to allot that to someone else. And so we'll see if the Cowboys follow suit or if they allow Amari Cooper to hit free agency, test the market, and probably ultimately end up elsewhere. The 20th Mike says, when will this take place? The CBA is agreed upon. It's done. So I'm pretty sure they're all formalities in terms of signatures and things of that nature. But for all intents and purposes, it's signed, sealed, and delivered. Mr. TNA 2005 says, here in Romania, this CBA stuff looks horrible. I liked it a lot less when less teams were in the playoffs and the battle being even tougher to get there. I too. I'm a purist. So look, it used to be only 12 playoff teams, or it used to be 12 games in the 12 regular season games. Then it was 14. Then it was 16. Now it's 17. And so look, we can bitch and complain about the playoff teams 2-3 years from now. We won't have a problem with it, and we'll probably even love it, and it may even benefit your team. So right now, in the moment, we're creatures of habit. We like normalcy. 6 playoff teams has been our normalcy since most of us have been born. So the fact that they're making a change disrupts that normalcy that we've had, but at the end of the day, it will make the adjustment. It's not that big of an adjustment, and we'll probably grow to like it. It'll probably grow on us when it's all said and done. Octavius Brownlee says, diehard Falcons fan, but respect your channel, bro. Keep it up. Thank you. Greatly appreciate that. DMV Pride 10 says, the second seed gets screwed over so bad in this new playoff format. Instead of having a first round bye, now they have to play the worst team in the playoffs. Absolutely. Which puts more incentive. And this was the thought process too, outside of the money grab that comes with the extra postseason game in each conference. So the 2 extra postseason games. The thought process in this is now teams are going to have to battle even more for positioning in the postseason. there was once a thought process that, hey, it really doesn't matter between 1 or 2 seed. As long as I get that first round bye, being the 1 seed is great and I get home field. But as long as I got one of those first 2 byes, I'm good. Now the thought process changes from, hey, I just need to be one of the top 2 seeds to, hey, I got to do everything in my power to try to get my hands on that 1 seed, or else I won't get the luxury of having that first round bye. So the NFL also thought it would force teams to be a little bit more competitive at the front end of the postseason, teams that already know they're in and now jockeying for seeding. And then at the back end, those teams trying to get in, it makes for more competitive teams towards the end of the season trying to get into the postseason. So even the bad teams at the back end aren't eliminated from postseason contention week 15 and 16 and 17 and 18 now into the season. You could be 5-9 going into week 16 and still have a shot because of the seeding now, because you could get a 7th team in there. So even that 5-9 team has something to play for. You could be 6 and 10 and theoretically not mathematically eliminated going into week 18. 6 and 10. And you could not be eliminated from playoff contention. So you're still busting your ass trying to get in. That's what the NFL is trying to create here. So while it's garbage, because who wants a 7 and 10 team in the playoffs? Who wants that? That could happen. And teams could be battling for that. Reese says, apparently Bruce Arians is going to personally meet with Tom Brady and roll out the red carpet and make a pitch. Good for him. I still think he's going back to New England, but good for Bruce Arians. Devin Gonzalez says, what's your favorite thing about this deal? I think I've settled in on the one less preseason game. I think that is something that I'm looking forward to. And you know what? I'm also looking forward to the Super Bowl, if in fact this is the case, the Super Bowl being played on President's Day weekend, meaning that, you could be off on that Monday. Mr. TNA 2005 says, I hope Brady does not go back to the Pats. It would be very interesting to see him in another uniform. And he also says, have you ever seen a more entertaining player than Jameis Winston last season, keeping both teams in the match? Hashtag Jameis experience. Those guys are always fun. That's why I love Fitty Fitty, Ryan Fitzpatrick, because you never know what's going to happen. And Ryan Fitzpatrick does a great job of making sure both teams have a great shot at winning the ball game. And it's always fun to watch those guys go out and compete. So with that being said, that's going to do it for me, your man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me on this breaking news live edition of the CBA and the NFL Players Association and the NFL reaching an agreement on a brand spanking new CBA, which will give them labor peace through the season of 2030, which is music to my ears because I was somewhat nervous about a work stoppage potentially after this regular season. That is no longer the case. Looking forward to many, many years of football taking place. I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. Thank you for your viewership. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the Louie T Network if you haven't already done so. And if it's not your man T, it is not, I repeat, not the best NFL coverage it could be. Until next time, I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. You guys, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a good one. We got a long week ahead of us. If the league starts on time, which it seems like it's going to, free agency tampering period starts tomorrow. Franchise tag deadline tomorrow. It's going to be bananas, and I'll be here covering it wall to wall. I'll see you guys then. Have a good one.